Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to tackle a really fundamental question in economics. Why does changing the amount of money in an economy actually change real things, like jobs and production? It seems kind of obvious that it does, right? But for the longest time, our best economic models said it shouldn't.
Okay, so let's dive right into this with a puzzle that was a real head-scratcher for economists. You see, our simplest, most elegant models predicted that money was neutral, basically that it had no real effect on the economy at all. Now, that was a pretty neat result in theory, but it just didn't square with what we all see in the real world. So something was clearly missing from the picture.
To really get this puzzle, we first have to look at the standard framework where this whole idea of neutral money even comes from. It's a really powerful tool that economists use called the Real Business Cycle Model, or RBC model for short.
Now, don't get bogged down by all the math you see on the screen. What all these equations are really trying to paint a picture of is a kind of perfect theoretical world. In this baseline model, the economy is this super efficient machine where everyone, firms, households, they all make the absolute best decisions they can. And the most important assumption, the key to our whole puzzle, is that all prices and wages are perfectly flexible. They can adjust instantly to any new information, no friction at all.
So here's the kicker. In this perfectly flexible world, money doesn't matter for the real economy at all. If the central bank suddenly decided to double the amount of money out there, this model predicts that all prices and all wages would just double. But nothing real, like how much stuff gets produced or how many people have jobs, changes one bit. It's kind of like changing the unit of measurement from feet to inches. The real size of the object doesn't change. So what's missing? I mean, if that RBC model doesn't line up with reality, we've got to tweak it. And to solve this puzzle of money's real effects, we need to add two crucial and frankly much more realistic ingredients to our model. In this slide, well, it lays out the shift perfectly. We're moving away from that fantasy world of perfect competition where firms are just price takers. Instead, we're moving to a world of monopolistic competition, where firms actually have some power to set their own prices. You know, like your local coffee shop deciding what to charge for a latte. But the big one, the absolute game changer, is that we assume they can't just change those prices whenever they feel like it. Prices are predetermined, or as economists love to say, they're sticky. And this whole idea, it has a name, nominal rigidity. Just think about a restaurant. They can't afford to reprint their menus every single day just because the price of tomatoes went up by a penny. For a while, that price on the menu is fixed. That's a sticky price. And this one simple, totally realistic assumption, well, it changes everything. Okay, so now that we've built this new, more realistic economy where prices are sticky, let's throw a wrench in the works. What happens when something unexpected, an economic shock, hits? Let's start with a surprise change in the money supply. Let's walk through this, because this is the whole shebang right here. Imagine the central bank unexpectedly prints more money. All of a sudden, people have more cash in their pockets, and they want to spend it. Demand surges. But wait, remember our restaurant? Its menu prices are stuck. They can't just jack up the price of a burger on the spot. So what's their only option to meet all this new demand? They have to produce more. And to produce more, they have to hire more cooks, more servers. And just like that, because prices couldn't change, a purely monetary event caused a very real change in jobs and production. Money is no longer neutral. All right, that makes sense for a money shock. But here's where this model gives us a really surprising, kind of weird result. What happens when the shock is something we'd all agree is a good thing, like a sudden leap in technology that makes every business way more productive? I know, it sounds totally backward, right? But just follow the logic. Some amazing new technology comes along, making firms way more efficient. They can now produce the exact same amount of stuff, but with fewer workers. Here's the catch. Because prices are sticky, and the amount of money in the economy hasn't changed, the overall demand for stuff is still the same. So what does a firm do when it's facing the same level of demand, but now has a much more efficient way to produce? Well, in the short run, it lays off the workers it doesn't need anymore. A good shock, better tech, can actually lead to job losses, temporarily. Now, this powerful relationship our model has just shown us, this link between economic surprises, inflation, and real things like employment, it actually has a very famous name in economics. It's the theoretical foundation for what we call the Phillips Curve. For decades, economists and policymakers basically lived by what they saw in the data. And as you can see on the left, for the US in the 50s and 60s, there seemed to be this stable, predictable trade-off. If you wanted low unemployment, you just had to accept a bit more inflation. Easy enough. But then, the 1970s happened. As the chart on the right shows, that relationship completely fell apart.
All of a sudden, we had high inflation and high unemployment. What on earth was going on? Well, the reason, famously pointed out by the economist Robert Lucas, was all about one thing: expectations. You see, you can't just look at past data and assume those relationships will hold true forever, because people aren't robots. If policymakers try to exploit some trade-off, people eventually catch on. They start expecting higher inflation, and then they change their behavior. They demand higher wages, for example, and that breaks the old relationship. And this is exactly where our sticky price model comes back in and saves the day. It gives us the theory behind what's known as the new Keynesian Phillips Curve. And again, don't worry about the math itself. The key insight from this equation is that today's inflation doesn't just depend on something called the output gap, which is just the difference between what the economy is producing and what it could be producing. It also depends, crucially, on that factor we just talked about: what people expect inflation to be in the future. Expectations are now officially a part of the model. So there you have it. We've solved the puzzle. By introducing just one realistic assumption, that prices are sticky, we can explain why money isn't neutral. We can see how monetary policy has very real effects on jobs and on growth. And we even get a framework for understanding that complicated dance between inflation and unemployment. And that, of course, leaves us with the next big question for central bankers everywhere. Now that we know you have this power, how exactly should you use it?